You ladies and gentlemen of the press have been less than honest reporting to the American people what's going on in this country.
The baby's out of incubator.
We're dealing with Hitler revisited.
This is the Scott Horton Show. Libertarian foreign policy, mostly.
When the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
We're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years.
They don't know what the they're doing.
Negotiate now. End this war.
And now, here's your host, Scott Horton.
All right, you guys, welcoming back to the show, the great Dave DeCamp. He is, of course, our news editor at antiwar.com, and he hosts Anti-War News, which reminds me, I got to get a new radio show and call it Anti-War Radio again before somebody else steals the title of my radio show, now that I'm not on KPFK anymore. Anyway, host of Anti-War News every night with your morning headlines from antiwar.com, which he writes up at news.antiwar.com. So you go to the front page, you get everything. You go to original, you get all our columns, but you go to news.antiwar.com, you get everything Dave writes, plus Jason Ditz and some Kyle Anzalone too, although mostly we just link to Kyle Anzalone and his great news stuff that he does for the Institute. That's how that works. But anyway, Dave, there's so much going on. I don't know where to begin. Except that I'm going to consult my notes because I think I wrote my notes in order of where I want to begin and what I want to talk about. Now, the problem with that is I'm old and I can't see. Oh, yes. You had a story about the resignation of this Admiral Halsey back a few weeks ago. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, about a week after they started doing the strikes on the boats. And the news story is that you say he was actually forced out. He did not resign in protest. He was forced out, but why? Over his protest?
Yeah, well, this is the new report now from the Wall Street Journal. It was mid-October that he announced he was stepping down, and Pete Hegseth put out the thing saying, praising him and everything. And at that time, there were reports that said he raised concerns about these boat strikes, this bombing campaign against these alleged drug boats. So a lot of people, I think, assumed that he was resigning because he was uncomfortable with the whole thing. But according to this report from the Wall Street Journal, he resigned because Hegseth pushed him out, basically, essentially pressured him to. And just for people to understand, what position he was in, this is a 4-star admiral 1 year into his command of U.S. Southern Command, which is usually a 3-year post. So for this guy, a career, to cut his career short like that is very, very unusual. But that's what the reporting says now. And apparently, they clashed over some other things. If you remember, I forgot all about this. They were talking about securing, taking back the Panama Canal, hinting at taking military action, even though it's completely unnecessary. But apparently Hegseth asked him to draw up plans to do that. And he kind of hesitated a bit or didn't do it fast enough. So Hegseth was mad at him about that. And then they started bombing these boats. And he, had concerns both about the legality of it and the fact that he was not in total control because they had JSOC involved and, special operations. So he was kind of out of the loop a little bit. And it was those things. And then Hegseth said, all right, get out of here, basically.
So he was complaining, is that right? That they said that he was complaining that Joint Special Operations Command was doing these targeted raids in his area, but not under his chain of command? Yeah,
that's according to that report. He had a problem with that.
He complained about that specifically, and they said, all right, well, then beat it if you don't like it. Okay.
Yeah, and also the legality. The wording from the report was the murky legality about the whole thing.
And
I think murky is an understatement here because I think it's pretty clear this whole thing is very illegal, what they're doing.
Well, let's talk about that in a second. I'm worried that maybe it is a little murky. But now I forgot what I was going to ask you. Is it certain that it's JSOC and not just SOCOM, but it's Navy SEAL Team 6, like the top tier special operations forces are the ones committing these strikes?
We know that about the first strike. That's the only one that we have like a lot of details on now because of this whole controversy over the fact that they bombed survivors, and that it was SEAL Team 6 and JSOC. The commander at the time, Admiral Bradley, was the head of JSOC at the time.
Mm-hmm. And now they're in the middle of moving him to SOCOM.
Yeah, he got moved up to. Yeah, he's been moved up to SOCOM, I think, in October. But at the time of that strike, he was JSOC.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that's moved down, but maybe that's just the rotation. I don't know that that's necessarily a demotion to SOCOM, but JSOC is the top tier. Mm. So, but anyway, I don't know. I guess so. Before we get to the war, potentially on the boats and the legality of the boat strikes. Now, I had read that they're invoking the authorization to use military force from after 2001, which was the same excuse that Obama used for all of his wars. They added the implied associated forces, which is actually not in the language of the AUMF at all. I believe at one point they attempted to amend the AUMF to add the phrase "and associated forces," and that failed. And then they just went on pretending that that phrase was in there anyway. And then they go on to pretend that associated forces means anybody in the world that they want to kill, and that they can sort of declare like these pseudo active war zones without actually declaring an active war zone, but treat people within these whatever zones, whatever they call them. It's all very ad hoc, as enemy combatants and kill them. They call them terrorists. They call them combatants. They said that the two guys trying to climb back in or hang on to the flotsam of the boat. I saw Tom Cotton anyway use the phrase that they were trying to get back into the fight. And so, I mean, that's all very deliberate. They phrase it like that so that they can treat them as enemies rather than as criminals. In the same way that after September 11th, they stopped indicting Al-Qaeda guys with grand juries and started just targeting them and killing them and or, hiring them to take over Syria. But you know what I mean? So, in all your readings on this, though, are you seeing much debate about the legality? Because I think here's my problem, Dave, is I see people say, and I agree with this, that this is illegal, that you can't just murder people. If these people are suspected criminals, then you just arrest them and give them a trial, and it ain't a war zone, right? But when I see people argue that, I see them not even take into account the other side of the argument. They just declare that as fact, as though that's their opinion is the supreme law of how everyone should interpret this. And they're not acknowledging that, well, they are claiming the AUMF, and the AUMF is an endless general writ for George Bush or any of his successors to do whatever they want, and has been interpreted so broadly over the last 25 years. So, now I could join the critics in ridiculing that position, but legally speaking, I haven't seen much of the argument back and forth. It seems to be people just kind of take one side or the other and ignore the other side of the argument. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't really know how they're using the AUMF here, because as far as I'm aware, the claim is that they're saying that they're in an open conflict. This is what Trump has told Congress, that they're in an open conflict with cartels, and they claim that this is self-defense. Like, they're citing Article 2 of the Constitution and claiming that the U.S. is under attack by these drug boats, which to me is just completely absurd. That's why I think it is very clearly illegal. And they're relying on an opinion from the Department of Justice that has remained classified. And I know they're calling them terrorists, narco-terrorists, and they've declared these organizations as terrorist organizations. So they're probably leaning on the AUMF in some way. But this is the claim is that this is self-defense. And you saw the White House say that they, when they were asked about the second strike, they said, oh, these are narco-terrorists or whatever. And that was a self-defense strike. And this is a boat that they bombed off the coast of Venezuela. And so the whole argument is just, I think, completely absurd. I think you're muted there.
God dang it. Always do that. I'm sorry. I wish I had the thing in front of me that I was reading the other day that said that they were invoking the AUMF. This is, well, let's see what this is. Sorry, I'm doing this live. Nah, sorry, this is off topic. Okay, maybe I just have that wrong that they're invoking it. I'm sorry, I read something about this yesterday. I just don't know what the hell it is.
The thing is that the DOJ opinion is classified, so there might have been some reporting that they use the AUMF in there. But as far as I'm aware, it's this self-defense claim, and that's why you see Trump say, "Oh, for every boat we bomb, we save 25,000 lives in the U.S. or whatever." And so they started targeting boats in the Eastern Pacific, but they started this thing targeting these boats going from Venezuela to Trinidad, very close to the coast of Venezuela. Uh-huh. And this is not a route. Apparently, this is a transit route for cocaine that goes to Europe and or West Africa, or potentially marijuana that's sold in Trinidad and Tobago. So this idea also that these boats are on their way to the U.S. is at least the ones that they're bombing near Venezuela is just. I mean, it's just absurd. They're just lying in a few different ways here. But that's why Good.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I found a BBC article where they quote an expert saying that they're relying on it, but it is not really specific enough.
Well,
it's the rule of men anyway. But I mean, look, the only law that really applies to him is if the House is willing to impeach him. If they ordered him to stop and he kept going or something, but they're never going to do that anyway. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if this turns into anything
one of the things I saw, Dave, they said this isn't a war crime. It's just a crime. It's just murder because it's not a war. This is totally outside of any legitimate type of a war. And so to even call it a war crime is, in a sense, begging the question or accepting their false premise, kind of,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's why the whole conversation has become about this second strike, when really Kelly Vlahos has a good piece about it in the American Conservative today, when really the question should be about the whole thing, that they're doing here. This whole bombing campaign. But the unfortunate thing is that it seems like it has a lot of support, not so much war with Venezuela or regime change, but when it comes to bombing these boats, among, MAGA types, they seem to be pretty on board with the whole thing.
It depends, but yeah, too many.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that happens, partisanship is the mind killer. It's just, what do you prefer, the Democrats? Oh, whatever, you prefer the foreign enemy. And that's just the way people take it.
Yeah, and one thing I see a lot too is you didn't care when Obama was doing double tap strikes in the Middle East or whatever. And, obviously we cared. But when you see some of these Democrats, these senators like Chuck Schumer talking about this, it does make me kind of roll my eyes. It's dude, all the things that the U.S. military that they've done from Obama to Biden to Trump, just this year, the recent bombing campaign in Yemen was so brutal. There was a report of a double tap strike and just massacred dozens of civilians, bombing this fuel port. Nobody even batted an eye about that.
Yeah. So, how about the conservative constitutional Republicans invoking the lawlessness of the Democrats for their own standard of behavior? That anything that the Democrats do is permissible. Oh, is that really right? Huh? Yeah. What happened to all their criticism of Democrats abusing power? Never mind that stuff.
Yeah. All
right. Well, point. I guess I screwed that up because I certainly can't find whatever it was I was reading. I don't remember what it was I was reading. And when I Google the Venezuela thing and the boats and the AUMF, I'm not getting that they invoked that, other than that one BBC article where the guy was saying that, but it didn't seem to be very specific.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Anyway, screw me. I don't know. I'm up there. Dang old. But see, here's another important part of it, right? Was that Maduro said he had a very nice phone call with Trump, or a cordial one at least. And, I was talking with Brad Pierce earlier, and he noted that at least one of these sort of little press conference things, Marco Rubio looked kind of deflated, like he'd been told that, no, we're actually not going to go after all. I mean, after all, it is completely nuts. And the American people are opposed to it. What are they going to do? Come up with a whole new weapons of mass destruction propaganda campaign here? That ain't going to work. So like, for a real pretext for war, they're selling cocaine to American Republican Party members. You know what I mean? And I don't mean the rank and file. I mean the leadership of the party. That's who snorts all the cocaine. Everybody knows that. Regular people can't afford cocaine. You know, it's like Wall Street is half the demand for that stuff in the country. And so we're supposed to go to war with their suppliers of their, fun time drug there. Yeah. So they can stay up late. I don't think that's really a casus belli thing there. I don't speak Latin, but, I was talking with Brad about this. He was saying, comparing it to Iraq, there was no good reason to attack Iraq, but there were really big, not necessarily good enough, but really big pretend reasons to attack Iraq. Whereas here, they got nothing, right? Like, what are we going to do? We're going to do a regime change in Venezuela just because Marco Rubio wants to, just because they're dirty commies and we don't like dirty commies. They got to have a better pretext to do a real attempted regime change, right? Am I crazy? Is this really going to happen, Dave?
I mean, it is hard to believe that it's going to happen, but like we keep moving in this direction. A lot of this is a psyop. Like there's a lot of psychological operations going on here aimed at Maduro, aimed at Venezuela, trying to scare him, trying to get people in his inner circle to turn on him. That's why we've seen all these leaks about, Trump's, going to start airstrikes any day, or they've leaked it twice now that Trump approved CIA covert operations inside Venezuela, which is kind of strange that they would leak that twice, because of course that's just an excuse for Maduro to crack down on any opposition. But what we're seeing, because we have the military buildup. Now there's an aircraft carrier strike group in the Caribbean, and they're flying bombers near the coast of Venezuela. And the military is very active, very close to Venezuela right now. And there is also like kinetic military action happening because they are bombing these boats. So they're giving every sign that they're planning to start a war here with Venezuela. But at the same time, as you said, like the propaganda is just not even like there. Like I saw this woman, Maria Salazar. She's a Republican House representative from Miami.
I saw that. Yeah.
I mean, she goes on the news and just spits out like whatever she can think of. The first thing she said is, "Oh, it's the oil. American oil companies are going to have a field day." That was her language. There's so much oil. And then she starts going off about, Iran's there, Hezbollah's there, Hamas is there, Nicaragua, North Korea, China, Russia. And then she says, "Oh, Maduro's selling uranium to Hamas and Hezbollah," and like literally just throwing everything out. And you see this woman that won the Nobel Peace Prize, Machado. She's doing interviews and saying, like, I think you sent me the link the other day, that it's a $1.7 trillion investment opportunity for American companies. Yeah. She's talking about the oil, saying, "Oh, take out Maduro. We're going to walk right in. It's all going to be great." And it's kind of strange because, and then the other thing is the narco thing. They designated this cartel, the Cartel de los Soles, or Cartel of the Suns, as a terrorist organization. But it's not an actual cartel. Like it literally doesn't exist. This is a term that they used first starting in the 1990s to describe some Venezuelan generals who were accused of drug trafficking because they have sun insignias on their uniforms. And I saw Max Blumenthal dug this up. These guys at the time were actually working with the CIA. And actually, the CIA was allowing them to transport cocaine into the U.S. so they can, use them for some other case. And then this term was kind of revived under Chavez. And again, it's kind of today, like the real allegation from like U.S. funded think tanks and like the serious allegation against Maduro, not kind of the cartoonish one that we're being fed, is that, there's like this network of Venezuelan military officials who are responsible for certain territories, and they allow drugs to ship through, and they kind of protect certain people so they get a cut. And the allegation against Maduro is that he kind of lets this happen to keep his people happy because his government's broke and he can't pay him. That's like the real allegation here. this idea that he's like a narco kingpin, like sitting on a throne and directing, laughing and saying, all right, send all the cocaine to the U.S. Like, it's just not, it's just a fantasy. It's completely a fake narrative that we're being fed here. But this is what they're going with. And I mean, it seems like Trump has said, Hegseth has said that this Cartel de los Soles designation gives them the authority to attack Maduro and his government if they want.
Hey guys, Scott here. You've probably noticed when I'm interviewing somebody or somebody's interviewing me that I've got this great bust of Dr. Ron Paul in the background on my bookshelf here. Well, you can get one like that too. They're available again from the great artist Rick Casali. Just go to my website, scotthorton.org, and look in the right-hand margin. Click the link through there and use promo code Horton. You'll save $25 and get free shipping, at least in the lower 48 states. And he does custom work as well. The audiobook, I know. People are always asking me, when are you going to be done with the audiobook for Provoked? Well, the fact is I had to put it on hold for a bit while I'm working on the Academy. But the fact of the matter is I have published the H.W. Bush chapter and the Bill Clinton chapter, which is already, I think, 9 or 12 hours, an audiobook worth just right there. And I have finished recording all of W. Bush, all of Obama, and about at least half of Trump 1. Although I still have a lot of editing to do on all those before I can publish them. But you will be the first to know if you sign up and subscribe at my Substack, where I am publishing this audio in pieces until I get the whole thing ready together for Audible eventually. So sign up at scotthortonshow.com. That's my Substack, scotthortonshow.com. Hey, you guys should buy my books. My first one was called Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. It was really good, and it all came true, too. Watch me predict the end right there in the preface of the thing. Also, Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. That's all the wars from Jimmy Carter all the way through the first Donald Trump administration. And then my latest is Provoked, How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. Tucker Carlson says it's the definitive take. Expanddesigns.com. That's my friend Harley Abbott's company, and he is the webmaster for the Scott Horton Show, as well as the Libertarian Institute. He is the guy that redesigned the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity website. He's done a lot of great work for other friends of mine. And unlike a lot of webmasters and web developers and different guys that I have worked with over the years, the thing is about Harley Abbott and his team is they do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it, and are just extremely reliable and extremely knowledgeable, and 100% vouch for the great Harley Abbott over there. You got a website, you need it fixed up, you need a new one, you're setting up a business, working on any kind of online project like that, check out expanddesigns.com. All right, so now this AI, Gemini AI thing says that they did invoke it, but one of their sources is the BBC thing where they're just invoking this expert guy says. But then there was something at Just Security. I'm obsessed with this now. There was something at Just Security where this wasn't it. It was the other one that mentioned it and said, when they called Tren de Aragua a terrorist organization, that is meant to invoke the AUMF of 2001. Even that's kind of vague. I don't know. I'm sorry to belabor this point. It all seems so unresolved. Hey, wait a minute. Why don't you ask the State Department? You ask the State Department for comment about stuff like that all the time. Could you get some clarification on that, on whether they're trying to claim the AUMF or not?
Yeah, sure.
God, give them any bad ideas.
Yeah, right. Hey, we didn't think of that.
They don't really have their act together. It's not like David Addington is up there running the show. It's a clown show completely with that Pam Bondi and all these kooks. All right. Anyway, Somalia. We've always been at war with Somalia. Well, since you were a kid anyway. And I don't mean since 93, because America wasn't that involved, I don't really think, between 93 and 2001, but we've been bombing them since 2001. Speaking of the Joint Special Operations Command, when they took Delta Team A out of Tora Bora and replaced them with Team B, instead of sending Team B in to reinforce them, they took Team A out and sent them to Somalia. I think. I'm pretty sure about that. Or was it SEALs? I'm pretty sure it was Delta. So, they wanted to make sure that the guys at Tora Bora didn't have what they needed to kill bin Laden and Zawahiri, the butchers of New York City, because after all, then the war would be over and the American people would be satisfied, and that would be no good. Anyway, so then they've been killing Somalis ever since then. So that's going on 24 years now, this month. And they accomplished nothing, really, other than one, creating the Islamic Courts Union in reaction to their intervention, and then creating al-Shabaab in reaction to their intervention against the Islamic Courts Union. And they've been fighting al-Shabaab ever since then, and in favor of this sock puppet transitional federal government that they've created that never seems to transition to anything. And you have done the best job in the world reporting this year on the Trump administration's ongoing drone war. Actually, before I turn it over to you, I want to invoke one more dang anecdote from history here, which is in a story in the Washington Post that was clearly sourced to James Mattis himself, former Marine Corps General James Mattis, who had been Secretary of Defense under Donald Trump in Trump 1. Trump said to him, he's like supposedly mocking Trump's, ignoramusness when he tells this story. Trump said, "Why do we have to be in Somalia? Who cares about Somalia?" And Mattis said to him, "You have no choice. We're trying to prevent, and our presence there is helping to prevent another Times Square attack." Because, Trump's heard of that because he's from New York City, But meanwhile, as you and I know, the Times Square attack, luckily failed, of 2010 was direct retribution by the Tariqi Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban that had never attacked us before, for a drone strike in Pakistan. And this American Pakistani or Pakistani American went and volunteered to try to blow up Americans in revenge for that. So it's the kind of thing we're doing in Somalia and Pakistan is the kind of thing that caused the Times Square attack and similar attacks. But anyway, that was what Mattis told Trump. And he told him, according to him, you have no choice. And this would be back in 2020. And Trump said, okay, well, fine. And when we already know, because it was our buddy, Colonel Douglas McGregor, temporarily had a job advising the Secretary of Defense and wrote up a memo. Let's get out of Somalia. And Trump ordered it done and then countermanded himself, just like on getting out of Syria was in there too. And contradicted himself for that third time on Syria and canceled his order to get out of Somalia. So then Biden keeps bombing him for 4 years straight, picking up where Trump left off. And now Trump picks up right where Biden left off and has now bombed them more than Obama, more than Biden, more than Trump won in just 1 year. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. So actually, Trump did pull a few hundred troops out of Somalia at the end of his first term, but he left some in there, and the drone strikes continued, and then Biden came in and he sent them right back. But when we get into the numbers here, I mean, it's really unprecedented, the level that that the U.S. is bombing Somalia this year. And so these are numbers from AFRICOM, the airstrikes that they confirm. So based on my count, they announced a few more today. We're up to 106 this year. That's the U.S. launched 10 in 2024. So it's more than 10 times what was launched last year. It's more than Biden and Obama ever launched in Somalia, according to AFRICOM numbers combined. And it broke the previous annual record for airstrikes was 63, which Trump set back in 2019. Throughout his first term, he did increase the airstrikes in that term as well. He launched over 200 over the 4 years. And now in the first year, we're at 106. I mean, this is, again, just a really unprecedented level. And you mentioned that story, that anecdote about him and Mattis. I don't know if you've noticed what Trump has been saying about Somalia lately, but it hasn't been very nice things. He said last week, oh, Somalia doesn't even have a government. They can't even control their country. It's just people killing each other all over the place over there. And another time a few months ago, he said, oh, no longer are we policing the far reaches of the world like Kenya and Somalia. We're not policing the world. And he cites Somalia as an example of a country that we're not involved in, apparently. So I really think what happened at the beginning of this administration was, this is kind of the talking point we see from Hegseth. We see it from J.D. Vance as well. Like the Trump doctrine, is if we're going to use military force, it's going to be overwhelming and quick. We're going to be in and out. So I think another thing that happened, this happened during the first Trump term too, is that he loosened the rules of engagement, gave more authority to the lower level officers to launch airstrikes and not have to get approval from the White House. So I think he kind of just signed off on the escalation and hasn't been paying attention to it. One reason why is because there's been no media coverage in the U.S. I mean, literally none. There was a couple stories. Fox News and Stars and Stripes had a story when we hit 100 airstrikes. Of course, the Fox News story made it sound all, great. But most of the time, it's literally just me. When it comes to an American media outlet that has a website with news stories, most of the time, it's literally just us covering it. Not on any network shows. Matt Gaetz had me on to talk about it. I guess he's on a network. He's on OAN. But besides that, literally no coverage. And what is it accomplishing? I mean, they've really ramped up. So you mentioned Al-Shabaab. Obviously, the U.S. has been fighting them. And there's no sign that they're going to defeat Al-Shabaab. I mean, they're like gaining some territory now in some areas since they launched this counteroffensive, but they're losing some in others. And there's no like military defeat of Al-Shabaab on the horizon. But then there's also this ISIS affiliate. No,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So then there's also the ISIS affiliate, and they popped up in 2015. An offshoot of Al-Shabaab, one of their leaders went to start this ISIS group. And they're based in Puntland in the Northeast. And I mean, according to the estimates, they have a few hundred. The max estimate of their number of fighters is like 1,500, but I don't think it's really that high. And they're based in these caves and these like remote mountains. And the U.S. has just been like bombing the hell out of these mountains. And I don't know what is it accomplishing. They say they're going to intensify. The AFRICOM commander went up to Puntland last month and he said, we're doing great. We're going to intensify things and keep ramping it up. Could they eliminate those ISIS guys in those mountains? Maybe. But again, when it comes to Al-Shabaab, I mean, this is just, you talk about endless war. It's very similar to Afghanistan. You're propping up this very weak central government that without foreign support would collapse. And so another thing, which I think this is kind of how this got started in this administration, similar kind of to the Mattis story, although I don't know if Trump was involved in this conversation. There was a report in the New York Times in the beginning of the year that they had a meeting, within the administration. State Department officials were actually suggesting evacuating the embassy in Mogadishu because they were worried it could fall to Al-Shabaab. But on the other side was Sebastian Gorka, who's Trump's top counterterrorism official on the National Security Council, arguing, no, we can't leave. Let's just double down, ramp up, the airstrikes and keep supporting this very weak government.
That was what I was going to say when I rudely interrupted you a minute ago, was what's the role of Sebastian Gorka in this? Because I remember reading that he was going to take some counterterrorism role and with a special focus on Somalia, but that was many months ago.
Yeah, I think he's the brains behind this. I think he's the one that within the White House that this was his idea and pushed for it. And now it just goes on.
All right. And yeah, you already concluded. It doesn't accomplish anything. Al-Shabaab ain't going anywhere. They're just helping recruit more people. Plain old insurgent math. So where are we at here? Man, we're already at time, but let me get you know what? I don't want to hear about Gaza and the West Bank today. Tell me about Donald Trump's letter that he wrote to Abu Mohammed al-Jawlani.
Well, yeah. So Tom Barrack.
This is almost as depressing as the Gaza Strip, honestly.
Yeah, Tom Barrack, who is Trump's ambassador to Turkey. I don't know if you've been following him, but he is kind of comical to follow the things that he says. He's kind of like Trump. He says things that they're not supposed to say, but is like kind of the truth of what like he says they're arming the Lebanese military so they can fight their own people. But so he's a big fan of Shara or Jawlani, the Al-Qaeda commander who took over Syria. And he met with him last week or earlier this week and gave him a letter. They took a nice picture together, and it's a Trump, in his big handwriting. And he says, I forget exactly what he said, but he said, "Oh, Ahmed, you'll be a great leader, and the U.S. is going to help!" ! And his big signature, and then a picture of them in the Oval Office. So, it's not just like Trump is lifting the sanctions and saying, good luck, Syria. He's actually forming a military alliance with this guy. They've officially joined the anti-ISIS coalition. And there's reports, I haven't seen anything since the initial Reuters report, that they're going to build a base in Damascus. But there's been that report, and they're going to sign some kind of formal deal giving the U.S. like a formal military presence in Syria. But just another thing, just about one more thing about just kind of the insanity of this. So CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, they put out press releases once in a while and say they've done this amount of raids against ISIS, killed this many guys. And they put one out saying that they did it with their Syrian partners, in the government, which is literally Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And in one of these raids, they captured a guy, and then they learned, there's kind of conflicting reports on this. But something happened where they captured this guy who was known as an ISIS commander, or a former ISIS guy at least. And they capture him. And according to one of the reports, then they learn, actually he's HTS. He's an HTS guy. So they let him go. And but apparently he got injured in the raid, so he ended up dying of his wounds. But I mean, there's a lot of fluidity between HTS and ISIS, and
of course,
the idea.
that HTS is ISIS, West chapter. Geez,
so
and what's funny is
of U.S. troops fighting alongside these guys. It's just crazy.
Yeah, no, look, man, earlier today, unfortunately, his internet crapped out halfway through, so I'll have to follow up. But I got a half an interview out of William Van Wagenen, author of Creative Chaos, who wrote a piece for The Cradle. In fact, we should probably just run this as a news story. It could be a viewpoint too, but you should track this down. Maybe send it to Kyle. At The Cradle, about how the jihadi army, such as it is, they're going around kidnapping Alawi women and quote unquote marrying them. In other words, enslaving them. These bin Ladenites. And they've been, of course, in the recent past, there were these terrible massacres and all the rest of this. And unfortunately, he had internet problems, so we were unable to finish the interview. But he's got a great write-up at The Cradle today about how, hey, guess what, Dave? The bin Ladenites are bin Ladenites and behave as such. What did you think that they were going to do, man? Not you, anyone. Well, look at this. And Donald Trump, he can't just say, okay, we can do business. He has to say, wow, you're so handsome and tall and powerful, and your past is so strong. What a strong past you have with your musky smell. And it's just like, dude, just stop. You don't have to commit such treason.
Did you see him spray cologne on him? He gave him some Trump cologne and gave him a little spray on his neck.
Yeah, and he's like flirting with them. Oh, your wife will like this. How many wives do you have? And we're like, they're hitting it off, man. And to Trump's credit, he's never heard of Americans dying in Mosul and Ramadi. He didn't know the first thing about that. Somebody must have told him, well, look, this guy used to be our enemy, but they must not have told him. Like, he claims he fought American soldiers. So I think we can conclude, we can presume him guilty of like getting a shot off, which whatever, they shouldn't have been in Mosul, but neither should he have. He wasn't Iraqi. And still, regardless, the United States of America should not be backing him now. There was a time in 2016 where Murtaza al-Qaeda, now Ryan Grimm's partner, and a bunch of others, Al Jazeera and a bunch of others, interviewed Jelani so that he could supposedly pretend to back away from his association with al-Qaeda. But he didn't really. He just said, like, look, we're not going to be, he didn't say like, oh, we renounce them and their works and we're not like that at all anymore, or whatever. He just said, listen, we have to distance ourselves from the original organization because it looks bad. And it would be better for us if we did that. And that was it. And I don't think in the Al Jazeera interview, and I know that Murtaza Hussein did not say, hey, man, you swore blood oath loyalty to the butchers of New York City. So why should Americans do anything but kill you, pal? And didn't ask him anything like that. The whole thing, just like with Martin Smith at Frontline, the whole thing was obviously a whatever CIA, Turkish, Israeli op to launder this guy, dress him up in a monkey suit. We used to joke, maybe they used to listen to my show, because I would always say, you see how this guy's wearing a turban and a robe and he's dressed like Osama bin Laden and Obi-Wan Kenobi, as compared to Bashar al-Assad, who shaves his chin and wears not just a 2-piece, but a 3-piece suit every day. And then they dressed him up in a 3-piece suit, shaved his beard a little shorter. They didn't shave it off, but they trimmed his beard, dressed him up in a suit, just like Scott Horton suggested. Look, everybody, bin Laden in a suit, and now it's cool. And they did it. They've gotten away with it. I mean, we're having this conversation a year after he sacked Damascus, and America's making him an ally. He's going to be like a major non-NATO ally, like Bahrain or Qatar, Saudi Arabia. It's unbelievable. I know it's believable, but it's also unbelievable. You have to admit it.
It is, yeah. I mean, even like you think about 10 years ago or when the height of the war in Syria, if somebody would have told you that Jelani wins and actually becomes the president of Syria and the U.S. openly makes him an ally, like you would sound like some kind of conspiracy theorist or something.
As long as he hates Hezbollah and Iran, that's all that matters. I remember when he took over a year ago, Liz Wolfe at Reason Magazine announced that Damascus is liberated.
Mm-hmm.
Now Syria is free. And she says, well, boy, America and Israel better get in there and make allies with this guy before Iran gets in there. Yeah, thanks a lot, Liz.
I remember Ben Shapiro saying, it's going to get worse in Syria. Are they going to kill Christians and other minorities? Yeah, but it's going to be better because they're not allied with Hezbollah and Iran. It's like, okay.
Yeah,
Hezbollah
threatens Israel.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly right. Just wear it right on their sleeves, where their true loyalties lie. Pretty sick. Okay, with that, I'm going to let you go because I don't want to hear about Israel-Palestine today. I was already reading a bunch about it, and it made me sick. But I will tell all the people to just go and look at news.antiwar.com virtually every day, day in, day out, on every subject under the sun regarding foreign policy, especially American foreign policy over there. It's the great Dave DeCamp. And subscribe to his great podcast. It's on YouTube and all the great podcatchers, Anti-War News. Thanks again, bud.
Thanks, Scott.
The Scott Horton Show is brought to you by the Scott Horton Academy of Foreign Policy and Freedom, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage, Inc., Moondo's Artisan Coffee, Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom, and APS Radio News. Subscribe in all the usual places and check out my books, Fool's Errand, Enough Already, and my latest, Provoked, How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. Find all of the above at scotthorton.org, and I'm serializing the audiobook of Provoked at scotthortonshow.com and patreon.com/Scott Horton Show. Bumpers by Josh Langford Music, intro and outro videos by Dissident Media, audio mastering by Podsworth Media. See y'all next time.